Whereas a lot of other artists were sort of, when I was looking at my social media, were complaining that government has not put enough money into their arts grant, which is a very reactive stance to take. We're waiting for the government to do something about the arts conundrum. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, it's kind of like, no, I'm going to shift, I'm going to try something different, okay, cool, venues are closed, I'm going to go gig online, or I'm going to do whatever else.
Welcome to Make Art, the podcast that helps creatives get creative. Our community of entrepreneurs will show you how to turn your passion into a sustainable income-generating endeavor. Broadcasting from Cape Town, South Africa, here's your host, Jerome.
Hello friends, this is the Make Art podcast with me, your host, Jerome Rex. Welcome to it. This is where we talk about how you can be creative without that creativity being a burden, but rather that creativity being a blessing, a creative outlet for yourself as creative and also something for those around you to enjoy, a source of inspiration and a source of enjoyment for your friends, family, and whoever else is consuming your art. I have here with me today a very, very special individual, a very good friend of mine. I have actor, singer, songwriter, musician, husband, and soon to be dad, the fruit vendor in the building. And his superpower, I would say, is that he's probably the best storyteller that I've ever met. You must hear this guy introduce a song before he's about to play it. By the time he's done telling the story, you can't wait for him to start singing the song. Josh, good evening and welcome.
Yo, Jerome, thanks, man. Thanks for having me on your podcast. It's so awesome.
It is awesome. It's so great to have you here, and it's wonderful to have you just as a part of this journey. I credit you as being probably indirectly, I think, the reason that I kicked off the podcast to begin with. I had been thinking about starting my Patreon channel for about a year and never had the guts to pull the trigger, because you need this and you need that and you need that. And then one day you were just like, just do it, man. Just jump in, I think were your words. And I just went for it and I've not looked back. And with the podcast, I applied the same mentality and the same strategy. I just thought, I'm just going to start because what would Josh do?
Yeah, man. You actually, that's like one of my main mottos, like if you just jump straight into it. And most of what I know, I've learned while doing things that sort of freaked me out and scared me like to the maximum level. I often find that once you go through it, you're like, yo, why didn't I actually start this sooner? Or why didn't I do the thing sooner,
Yeah.
And it counts for performing just as much as it counts for anything else in life, and especially in the business of making art.
Well said, and that's what we're talking about today. So I'm not going to ask if that was the approach that you took when you became a dad. We can leave that conversation for another time. So Josh, I've known you for quite a while, almost 10 years. I think we met initially at the InZync poetry sessions, which was like this open mic / live performance event. You were performing as part of a collective called Gemengde Oorsprong, yourself and another friend of ours, Reinhard Stander. Later on, I saw you perform as part of a band, a 4-piece band, Brother and Brother. And you're also involved with a collective known as Watch Me When I'm Taller. But I suppose your main hustle musically is the Fruit Vendor brand. Am I correct? Yeah, so Fruit Vendor, funk, jazz, more funk. It's just a really funky band, man.
Yeah, man. Fruit Vendor is it's a little bit of a wild card because it's a bit of everything that I've listened to and that I've dug. And it makes it a little bit hard to sort of put it into a category, but I would say it is probably indie funk hip hop.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's probably as good a summary as any. Like someone else is gonna say different words and it'll probably come to about the same level of accuracy.
Yeah, well, I've been doing this thing because I'm actively putting together a marketing plan for the next leg of our journey, and I've been asking, for lack of a better word, fans, people have been supporting us, patrons, because I also do the Patreon thing, and nobody can kind of say what it sounds like. A lot of often people say, yeah, it sounds like so and so, but actually, it's very difficult to say what it sounds like, because it sounds like its own thing,
Yeah.
which makes it very hard for me as a marketer to like find an audience for it, an audience other than people I know personally, and people who are in Cape Town, who've seen us perform.
Well, yeah, because people who know you, they just in because it's Josh. It's Fruit Vendor. I must be there. So
Yeah,
to
yeah.
reach a
Like, so
new
they'll say,
audience.
I'll be like, yo, what does Fruit Vendor sound like? Fruit Vendor sounds like Fruit Vendor, man. It doesn't sound like anything out there. Which I suppose is what every musician wants to hear, actually, is like, your sound is so unique and so fresh that people can't categorize it. Because sometimes you'll listen to a band and you'll know, oh yeah, okay, that band sounds like Coldplay.
I've heard this before. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard this before. Or if it's like if it's a Christian band, they'll say it sounds like Bethel music or something, and then it's like, okay, you know what to expect. But with Fruit Vendor, it's been a bit of a challenge trying to categorize the sound, because I just, when I wrote songs, especially in the past, it was kind of just whatever I was feeling at the time, and just like, so there's this hip hop in there, there's funk, there's rock, there's jazz. I've been a bit of a chameleon as an artist myself I've been in the arts now for 10 years, and I've just done everything. I basically decided, like, I'm just going to do whatever comes my way, whether it's theater, music, radio. I was a music journalist for a time, marketing, whatever. Like, I just went into it like head first, because I wanted to pursue those experiences, And so I think my sound is very much a reflection of that. Like I've just listened to a lot of stuff as well.
Yeah, and it's all in there because there's some electronic sounds in there, there's some Afro sounds, some Ashkandi, there's just a little bit of everything. Yeah, which bizarrely makes it harder to market and not easier. You can't just say this sounds like nothing else out there.
That's right. Yeah, especially in South Africa, because also we don't. It makes it hard from the perspective of, often if you hear like something sounding Maskandi, for example, you would assume that the vibe or the branding of the project has to follow those prerequisites, or that presupposition, or whatever you want to call it, of like, that is what it should be. And it's difficult to escape that in I found anyways, in a South African context. Even though we're sort of like this rainbow nation, people still assume that if you are like, if you're a white dude, you should be playing rock music, or like, if whatever, man, if you're
Yeah,
from the
no.
Cape Flats, then you are making hip hop. So it's been a bit of a challenge breaking those norms. People often don't know which way to take it, with Fruit Vendor. It's like, okay, well, and so my audience is also very, very wide. I mean, I've got like really young people digging it. Kids will often tell me their kids are, some of my friends will tell me their kids are loving it, and then there's people in their 20s, people in their 30s. One of our patrons is, I'd say she's probably in the 60s. It's a real mix of an audience. So it's also been a bit of a challenge trying to find, who is the ideal Fruit Vendor listener.
Yeah, who is my target market? How do I identify this person? Yeah, it becomes difficult.
Yeah.
It's like saying, who's a typical Cape Townian?
Yeah, exactly.
A very difficult question to answer. Josh, on that topic, I mean, you do all these different things. Your music has all these different influences. A lot of what you do is stuff that there is no reference for. I think we've actually spoken about this before, and I actually recently asked Sipokazi the same question, Sipokazi Jonas. You can't just go and Google or find what you are doing on YouTube. You're forging this new path. There's no reference for it. There's no template that exists. Nobody else in South Africa, I think, that I know of is pushing Patreon with the same level of aggression, I think, that you are doing. Where are you finding help from? Where are you finding guidance on these topics when there is no pattern for what you are doing?
Yeah, it's tough, man. They are two really successful Patreon creators in Cape Town, but they're very under the radar. And again, Patreon is a sort of marketplace where you can have an international audience, and it has nothing to do with the fact that you're from South Africa. And that's what attracted to me about Patreon, in that you can have a sustainable career or sustainable music economy or whatever art you're doing on Patreon, and it is supported on a global level. Um, so in terms of that, I had that in mind when I started the Patreon channel. But it was also coming from a place of uh, pre-lockdown. I started sort of really getting serious about it. I'd done 2 crowdfunding campaigns before. The first one was inspired by you, actually, Jerome. You were the first South African or local artist, and somebody I knew was actually doing crowdfunding. It was very new to me when I discovered that you can actually do crowdfunding. And so my first EP and my album, The Seedling, was funded through crowdfunding. And then Patreon just seemed like the next logical step. So then what I started doing, I started sort of researching what people who are so successful on Patreon are doing. And most of the time these people they're from other countries, mostly American. I found that when I go and I do research on these things, I'm looking at what these American artists are doing, because I suppose they're on the forefront of a lot of the advances in technology and the way we value art. So I often go and I look at what other Patreon creators are making. And a lot of times they are like big artists. For example, Jacob Collier is on Patreon, and he's a really successful musician, and he's doing really well. Corey Henry from Snocky Puppies on there, he's doing well. There is Scary Pockets, which is this amazing funk band, which is actually the owner of Patreon is the keyboardist from Scary Pockets.
Oh, wow.
So that was really inspiring to me, because here's this amazing businessman, like entrepreneurial dude, like Stanford educated guy, and he's playing in a funk band, and this funk band has they're sustainable, and they do like one track every week, like a new song every week.
God, that's crazy output.
Exactly, it's crazy. So I was really inspired by that, and I also felt that moving into an online space, the legwork is less, because it's like you're constantly doing a launch in a passive way, than actually having to physically do a launch, like build up to a launch of an album or whatever. You put the show together, you rehearse, you market it, you do the show, and then the show is done, it's over. And I think the biggest challenge that we have in Cape Town is that the audience is small. I mean, it's a big city, but the audience is small. And once they've seen you, they're like, okay, cool, I'll catch you at the next album launch. Or you go and you gig, and when they assume that you're busy and you're gigging all over the place, and they know that you're playing, today you're playing Waterfront, next week you're playing Stellenbosch Market, then you're playing at the Hout Bay Harbour Market, and then you're playing at whatever, then it kind of becomes a thing of, well, okay, you know what, I don't actually need to go to the show, because Fruit Vend is playing somewhere every week. I'm sure I will catch them
another time
sometimes. Yeah. And that's not really how the music industry works on a global level. On a global level, the artists will go on tour and they'll hit a different city like every week or every couple of days. And from that perspective, it's like
4 months.
Yeah, and it's growing. But in locally, we've only got 2 major music industries, and everything costs money. So that money has to come from somewhere. So if I need to iterate, I either have to take it out of my personal equity, like my own capital reserves, like my family money or whatever, or I have to make that money come from somewhere, because somewhere down the line, something has to be paid for, bought, Your team has to get paid. I need to make sure that they're still interested in the vision. That's my bandmates. So I started thinking about how can we make it sustainable without me having to constantly hustle in a terrestrial way. And so the lockdown kind of perfectly coincided with that year, because then it made me realize, oh my gosh, all venues are closed. Immediately you have to change and shift my thinking. So that's when the whole Patreon thing kind of came to the fore. And so ever since then, it's been like, well, how can I create a revenue generating vehicle that doesn't mean I have to be there manning the thing all the time. And Patreon is like a monthly subscription thing. So basically it's the Netflix for artists that you actually want to support.
Yeah. Only unlike Netflix, you're not just consuming, you're actually participating in the creation
Yes, you're
process.
participating, you are invested in it for the most part. My patrons are, they're following. Some of them are very actively following and some of them very passively. But like you mentioned earlier, I think it was before we went on into the interview. It's like the social media thing kind of seems like a never-ending rat race. Whereas Patreon is basically like a long sort of like journey around the country, and at your leisure.
Yeah. At your pace.
I'm all for it, man. I'm all for it, and I've actually become really I'm really delighted by actually what's happening with my Patreon channel.
Well, you should be. I think you add great value. I'm a patron. The value is there. It's fun. There's a real sense of community. I'm having a great time joining in and participating in that. And that's the hamster wheel. I mean, I became kind of disillusioned by playing the social media game, chasing reach and engagement and likes. And at the end of the day, all you've done is you've spent a bunch of money boosting posts, but you don't have the return for what you've put in.
And also, I mean, like the thing is, like I always look at it like this: if you are a musician, your main goal is your main thing is to make music, man. Like if there was no industry around it, you would probably still make music. If you were a painter, the same thing counts. If you were a poet, an actor, whatever, you are gonna make the art that you want to make, regardless of the outcomes. But I often find that if we are making it for but if something replaces that creation process, and that thing is not, it's not actually pushing you ahead, it's actually taking you away from having to that desire to create the art, then you should actually just cut it out, or reduce your use thereof. And I found, like you were saying earlier, I found that social media, I also did that whole thing, and I was just like, man, it actually occurred to me in the lockdown. It's like, it's just, I see the value of doing it on a very high level, but I also realize that it is not, it doesn't really cater to the career artist or the person that is in it for the long haul. And so I found that the more it was taking away from my time to be creative, the more of a chore it was to actually do the thing. So I do social media, but I've found that, like with Patreon, for example, I can speak directly to the people where my art actually has a home, or where it finds value.
Yeah, and for free. I mean, on Facebook, if you want to reach your entire following, you have to pay in order to reach your entire following.
Exactly. So the odds are actually stacked against you if you're starting up your project, with regard to the social media channels, because you're competing with advertising money, and there's no more organic reach. So it's changed almost very quickly over the last couple of years. It used to be like everybody sees your content, everybody sees your posts, but now nobody sees your posts. Or they do, but it's like a percentage thereof.
And it was very subtle, and it was very sudden. Like the next thing you know, it's like, hey, what's going on? I'm no longer able to reach my audience here.
Yeah. So what it has meant for me is basically I've got to create an ad budget. If you're going to be on social media, you'll have to see it as an advertising medium, and not necessarily a place where you can organically connect with people who are not your friends.
Or a place where you can get discovered, Justin Bieber style.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not like that anymore. And I've the faster I realized that, the better I could kind of see the thing within the context of my own personal strategy or my own business strategy with regard to, because if you even think, you mentioned Justin Bieber, I mean, like, even now that he's like signed and he's on a major label or whatever, they still pump like millions or thousands of dollars into his career to get new music to the people who need to hear it. It's basically been that way forever for every artist you've ever loved who's got a following. There's always a budget that is allocated toward that. Whereas I found often, like in Cape Town specifically, we don't we maybe spend our money on on maybe the production of the product, but not on the marketing. So I found that with Patreon, I can actually, because it's predictable income, I can now start to iterate, as they say in the business world, start to experiment. And now it starting to feel like a record label, and less of just me. Hey guys, here's my track. Have a listen.
Yeah. No, for sure. Having that predictable, steady income, it allows you to plan. It allows you to strategize. It does take some pressure off, because you can do a few things that previously you would need to find money for somehow.
Exactly, man. And like I mentioned earlier, like now when we do a track, my bandmates, I'm actually paying them. It's like a stipend at this stage. It's not like we're not talking big money here, but it's such a big contrast to when we recorded our album and it was just a labor of love. Now at least it's like, here's something. It's a little something, it's not like a lot, but it's better than like nothing.
Yeah, and also it's setting a trend, and it's setting a precedent, and it's putting you on a different path. You're moving away from that kind of do this for the love, do me a favor, and you're moving into a space where you are creating an economy, even though, albeit a small one, but you're at the forefront of starting something, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah, it's like there's this quote I think it's by Jay-Z. He says, no, it might not be Jay-Z, but there's a quote that says, I'm not in the music industry, I'm in the fruit vendor industry. So for me, it very much feels that way, like it's very much a small business. And
yeah.
And it's great to have it on its own, apart from my personal finances.
Yes, yeah, that's a wonderful thing. And I also find that when you start managing it as a business, and you try and be thoughtful about how you are spending your money, and thoughtful about how you are allocating funds, and engaging with your fans, you move away from trying to compete with the major labels. Because we were talking about it again before we started recording, like, we can't do what a major is doing, or what an artist at a major is doing.
No, you can't, because the thing is, they also they can do it better than you. Because they have teams of people. So there's one person whose job it is, to do the social media marketing, and then there's one person who is like the liaison between the label and the radio, and then there's the manager, and then there's the booking agent. All of these things, when you're an indie artist, you have to do all of those things. So basically I decided, like, what is the most important thing? The most important thing is to give this thing a monetary value, and that I can commit to on a monthly basis. That is like, okay, well, what do we actually need to do now? I need to bring more people into the fold now. So my current project is basically using Patreon money that I've earned and allocated to marketing, using those social channels, but actually treating those social channels as an advertising platform, and then using that to bring people into a conversation via email. Yeah. Because once you've got them in your email, then you can start to educate them on what the brand is all about, And then the email thing is meant to be automated, so then I can kind of also like take a step back and then go back to creating art. So So it's not like this thing of like, wow, I've got a track now. Okay, cool.
Check out my new single, fam.
Yeah, check out my new track, and then I'm on a call with like the radio, plugger, and then I'm trying to book my own gig, and then I'm dealing with a promoter. It's like I felt like that in the past. It's like you always hustling, you always it never stops actually, and then it actually becomes a point of stress, you know. So now, and I'm actually just like, oh, okay, great. I know what I can. And in December, I'm going to do this, with this budget, and I've only got this much, so I'm going to basically allocate it wisely,
Yeah, yeah.
And also time wise, I don't have as much time as I had when I was pre-married, and kind of freelancing for a myriad of different companies and clients. It's like, yeah, I've got a pretty robust schedule, that is like pretty much planned, so it meant that I actually had to become very smart with how I structure fruit vendor activities to make it worthwhile,
Yeah, in order to cope with that time scarcity now, because you can't just waste time.
Exactly. So it got me thinking about like a passive revenue, which is basically Patreon is that vehicle for artists, and then also automation, which is the next thing that I'm starting to explore.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that what you are saying there is very important, because I don't want people to think that we are being anti-social media or that we are being anti-major label. Like, those places, they have their role and they do their thing. But social media, I think where it becomes a hamster wheel, and I see it all the time on socials, is this guy teases his new EP. New EP's coming out. Check it out, fam. 3 weeks, 2 weeks, 5 days, 2 days. Yeah, the EP is out, and there's buzz for about 5 days thereafter, and then that buzz dies down. And now this guy's like, okay, now I need to work on another EP, but all this effort, all this time, it's so resource intensive, it's so draining to produce a body of work, and for it only to get you a little bit of buzz on social media for
oh yeah. So I mean, I like I so resonate with that, because it definitely feels that way when you're an indie artist. Like it's your brainchild, it's your vision, it's your heart and soul that you're putting out there, but you can only go so far, before you reach your burnout. I felt that way last year when I was doing my crowdfund, or the fulfillment part of my crowdfund. So basically like getting CDs and t-shirts and all the other merch things out to the backers, because although it was a great experience, me actually going through that whole thing, it's like, yo, dude, like in my mind, I thought, okay, cool, it's success. Next year, I'll do the same thing. But it's like, no, you're just never going to stop. It's got to sort of, at some point, it's got to start becoming sustainable from the perspective of like, not just financially, but also just in terms of your human resources, if you're one guy doing that. And I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. And I heard one podcast where it was said that, every time somebody discovers your content online and you're able to have a follow-up conversation with that person, even if it's automated, that's like a launch to an individual. Like, say somebody discovers my album and I have their email address and I put them into like a sequence or something where it's sort of educates that, hi, welcome to Fruit Vendors. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the track. This is what the track is actually about, blah, 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 blah. And then eventually it's that they start forming an opinion about it over time. That is like a fresh launch to an individual. So to me, that was very appealing, because it's like, oh my gosh, we always thought you do the album launch and that is the launch
once and that's it. Yeah,
exactly. But actually, no, it's the launch is, in an online sense, the launch is going.
It's continual. Yeah,
exactly. And another thing that I think a lot of local artists, we just assume that everybody's going to dig it, because it's like you local and you dig and we dig, we dig your vibe, but not everybody, I've noticed not everybody's into Fruit Vendor, and that's fine. Like not everybody's going to dig this quirky sound, but there's somebody out there in the world who's going to dig it, who doesn't have to have received a physical invite from me or to come to a show, or and that's really where my head is at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I definitely think that whole model needs a rethink. The whole model of how creatives are surviving, and in fact, you want to thrive. You don't want to just survive. You want to. We defy this concept of the starving artist, of the guy who is scraping by and he's gonna be famous once he's dead. You want to kind of be in a position where you are thriving now. And that brings me to my next question: is that we find ourselves in a place now where, because of COVID and because of national lockdown and global lockdown, in fact, the gig economy as we know it has been kind of turned on its head. You aren't able to go out every weekend. Now people are starting to go back to bars and they're going back to pubs and they're starting to gig again. Artists are starting to get out there and gig. How do you feel about the demise of the gig economy as we know it? Do you advocate for things to go back to how it was before, or do you see a new model?
Yeah, no. So I felt a very specific, I felt very much a shift happen, during the lockdown. For me, I'm not saying this is for everyone, but for me, I knew that things have changed forever. Like, it's not going back to the way it was. Not that, and I spent little time mourning it. I actually was not mourning it, because it actually forced me to make that decision. Like you mentioned earlier, you said, yeah, you've done about Patreon, for example, for a year, or you've been thinking about it for a year. And somebody told me last year, I said, Josh, have you heard of Patreon? You should try Patreon. And I was like, no, I don't have enough of a following. It's basically for artists who are really big, because there are really big artists on there. But it basically pushed me over the edge and was like, man, this is actually, I'm not saying that I won't, because I love performing. I love performing live in front of an audience. This, Jerome. We've shared many stages together. It's just rock the place, man.
Oh, it's crazy fun. It's fun, man.
But it's also it's like we said earlier, man. It's like a lot of people I know have immediately gone back to the gig economy. They've been waiting for the bars and the restaurants to open and the clubs so that they can go back and perform to big audiences. But even in that, like, I felt like the return for me, even with our really big gig that we did at the beginning of the year, was starting to kind of look like a diminishing return, because it took a lot more manpower to actually put together a live show than it does for me to do a live stream. And at least with a live stream, you can maybe you can develop an audience around this, what you're doing, who actually really want to be there, because they have a choice of doing a myriad of other things, like Netflix, go to the beach, go to the mountain, all of the things that were already a big distraction for audiences pre-lockdown. It's even more online now, but it's meant that you actually now need to start forging actual human connections with other human beings. And it's very less about, I am the artist, I am the performer, I am the person who's, in tune with the gods, and you are the audience, and you must come to my show and you must support me. Like, there's very much that idea about what the arts is like, or what it is to be a singer or a musician. And I feel like that wall has sort of come crumbling down. People are actually now interested in, why should I pay attention to you? And it actually forces them to make a decision now, like, I'm going to come to your live stream, or I'm going to, join your Patreon, because I'm really interested in what you're doing. And I found that the currency is almost spiritual in nature. It's almost, it's a soul thing in some way for me. I found that a lot of the people that I've been connecting with through my Patreon channel are in it because there's something that they're getting in return that can't be quantified. As you go to a show and you in a live setting and it's like a big party, often people go for the social experience. Oh, all my friends are going to be there, so let's go. And it's
yeah.
But then I often find, because it's a very thin connection in that sense, it doesn't really carry over to anything afterwards, and that became very frustrating for me.
Yeah, that's actually because your best chance of selling merch is on the night at the show, eh? Like the next day, if you don't get him on the night, this guy's not gonna call you the next day to get hold of your CD.
Exactly, and I've had that thing. Like people will get they'll be at the show and they get caught up in the moment. Like there's that thing that happens at the show where it's like people are like, oh wow, this is mind blowing, this is amazing, buy the merch. But or they say, listen man, I don't have cash now, but I'll email you tomorrow, or I'll and very seldom do they do that because the moment is gone. But I also found that, again, like coming back to your initial question about whether I'm hasty to, go back to the old method, if I'm in favor, I would say I'm not in favor of it, but I've also realized that there's a different way of doing it, and I've just chosen, for now at least, to focus on this alternative way, because it's also the artists who were, for example, who had sort of passive online businesses pre-lockdown, they kind of like weren't panicking when the lockdown hit. I remember going on one guy's Patreon channel, and he was saying, "Oh guys, thank you so much for having supported now in the lockdown. He's so grateful because that is like his salary. Whereas a lot of other artists were sort of, when I was looking at my social media, were complaining that government has not, put enough money into their arts grant, which is a very reactive stance to take, we're not actually, we're waiting for the government to do something about the arts conundrum. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, it's kind of like, no, I'm going to shift, I'm going to try something different, okay, cool, venues are closed, I'm going to go gig online, or I'm going to do whatever else, And I've sort of been trying to make it happen in a terrestrial sense for a long time, and then it felt like it wasn't working. But the minute I went online, now it was like, okay, cool. It's actually a bit easier.
Yeah. No, it's much easier. I mean, personally, as a performing artist myself, I think the traditional view of success is, are you touring? Are you gigging? Touring used to be the holy grail. We want to tour, we want to get out and so forth. And my personal situation has changed to the point where I don't want to tour unless I can turn it into an experience for myself and my family, and bring them with. And we're out in the garden route, and during the day we're lying on the beach and checking out restaurants and markets, and at night you're performing, But other than that, the shine is kind of taken off that for me, because you're away from home. And it's hard work. It's hard work being out there. As much fun as it is being on stage, it does become a grind. So I fully agree with you that here's an opportunity to explore something else that can make your creativity become sustainable over time. So we'll see. We'll see.
I also felt like, I also felt like, I really want to go into and do all of these cool things, because those experiences are priceless. Like, I've done some amazing things in my performance career that have sort of just, they were so amazing to go through those experiences. But especially if you are the brainchild, or you are the person pushing the thing, you actually, the sacrifice is really, really big, and it's a non-sustainable sacrifice, in the sense that if I'm the manager and I'm the performer and I'm the marketer. For my album launch, man, like I basically did 2 solid days of phoning people, WhatsApping them, and this is all custom messages that I've been sending to people, like, hey, Suzanne, we've got the show coming up. I know that you came to my one show in 2018. I'd love for you to come to this next one. That's literally what I would do. Like, and then venue owners are super happy because the place is sold out like 2 or 3 days before the time. But actually, the mental and sort of physical toll it took on you as the artist is tremendous. I'll basically do a show, and then I'll be out of it for 2 days or 3 days after that, which I quickly realized is not, it cannot go on like that anymore.
Yeah, no, that's definitely not sustainable, because you're the guy, you're the guy who runs it. But again, if you have another model, or you have passive income coming in, you can outsource some of that work, and you can make other things happen. And at the end of the day, the promoter is smiling. Like, I would really, for me, Erika Badu was such a great example of somebody who just won She won during lockdown because she's got the financial clout to make it happen, but she set up her own streaming platform from her website. She hired a satellite, believe it or not, so that the signal is great and it's uninterrupted. And she had her first streaming show and she charged $1, and then she had a second streaming show and she charged $2. And tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people tune in because it's Erika Badu. But you're not making a promoter rich, or a venue owner, because you own the venue. And since that time I've been really like, yo, I want my own online venue, man. I want to be hosting. Let me host DJs. Let me host performing artists. Let me become a promoter. Let me become a.
During the lockdown, I was researching sort of like live streaming, like what is the best way to do it? Because there's some people who are going live on their Facebook page, for example, and they have like a tip jar. But they show up every day at like at the same time every day. Like there's this one lady who is like at 9 o'clock in the morning. The first thing people see when they open their Facebook, like I don't know if you're one of those people, you're laying in bed and you open your Facebook just to scroll for a bit there, check notifications, and then this lady is the first thing you see, and that is her job basically. She's been doing that for 5 years, and that is a full-time job. 9 o'clock in the morning, she's on Facebook doing a live concert, and what she does is she, if you want to hear more, you must share the stream. Like and then she'll play another song. It's almost like a jukebox, like a human jukebox.
Oh, that's
and then
cool. That's a dope idea.
I heard of a guy, a DJ, like a funk DJ. He's one of these live looping guys who like plays all the one-man band type of situation, which I thought was really cool as well. He basically sells Zoom shows, Zoom concerts. So he'll like every day he'll go on Facebook and do like a live stream, which is like free to the public, and then like every second week he does like a paid for Zoom concert.
Wow.
And then these corporates actually started booking him to play for their office parties and stuff, during the lockdown. So then they all get the Zoom link, go into the Zoom, and this guy's busy DJing there and people busy partying. And it's like, why would you do that if you could just stream a DJ set off like Spotify or something? But for some reason, people will pay to watch somebody DJ on the other side of the planet on Zoom.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, it's these things are informed by demand. I often get asked like, Kiki, why do you still have CDs, man? Why are you still making hard copy CDs? Streaming is the future. But when gigs were still a thing, I would at every gig sell 4 or 5 CDs. So as long as people are buying it,
Yeah, I mean the CD, even for me, I remember asking you, Jerome, is it still worth it to like do CDs? When I was considering, okay, what's the best format to release our music? And actually, I basically did a year of selling my CD, and I still have a bunch of copies left. But the learning curve from that was, oh my gosh, like it was pure profit. Like because our crowdfund paid for the production. I sold every piece of merch at like a massive profit. There was like the only expense was like my human expense, of actually making contact with people and going to their house and dropping off their CD or their T-shirt or whatever. But from that perspective, I'll do it again. I probably made more money than I'll probably make from streaming like for like 20 years.
Oh, for sure. No, you would need thousands of streams to make one CD's worth of money.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like, I'm not against streaming. I understand that it's basically a very expensive business card for you to create music and put it out onto a streaming platform. But you've got to figure out how to convert those listeners to paying customers, which is basically where platforms like Patreon come in. Or if you can if you can get them onto your email list, which is something that you're in control of. No social media site algorithm is in charge of your emails. So the email list that you possess, and then from there getting them to buy merch, or see your next CD or LP or vinyl or whatever, man. For me, it would be the Patreon subscription because that's ongoing.
Yeah.
It's like
yeah. And Yeah, I just for me this is really the thread of our conversation so far, and what I'm picking up is that Facebook is fine, social media is fine, buying ads is fine if you are doing it in a thoughtful way, and you are doing it in a structured manner that's gonna see some return, or there's an intention to get a return, and it's not about I want to say that I've got 10,000 views for this video that I've uploaded. Because I did that. I mean, you and I did a song, and I put it up and I boosted it, and it was a few thousand views, which is nice for a little while. But it reaches a point where you start thinking, what am I doing? Where is this money? What's the end game here? What's the purpose?
Exactly, man. And I firmly believe that you shouldn't be spending money. This is just my view on it. You shouldn't be spending, as an artist, you shouldn't be spending money that's actually going to pay for your kids' school fees, whatever, or it needs to pay for your groceries, like you should find a means of actually generating that from your audience, and create this sort of circular thing where it's the money that is coming from your audience. Like I mentioned with my crowdfund, all the cash came from the audience. I then manufactured merch and then sold the merch back to other people, who weren't part of the initial crowdfunding drive, and the profit was pure. That the proceeds from that I could then reinvest into my business. Then I can buy Facebook ads with that, or Instagram ads, and then bring people in, and bring new audiences in. So I'm at the moment, it's almost like I'm using old money.
Yeah.
Using money that's like a year old.
The work has been done. You've spent the money already.
Yeah, I'm using money that is funding stuff that's going into the future now, and hopefully we'll bring in an audience that is people that I don't know, like strangers, or like it could be someone in Japan or someone in India or something. It could. That's the power of the reach that we possess now. But as long as it's smart, and there's a strategy to it, like, and that you're willing to sort of you're willing to learn, you're willing to iterate. So that's what they say, like, like you need money to iterate. And I found that I think we've all been sold, as artists, we've been sold this fallacy that everybody, you're just going to get lucky. There's going to be a lucky break. But actually, even locally, man, I mean, Jerome, you did a publicity thing last year, which cost money, paying a PR agency, to help with marketing your brand, but I don't know if I know how expensive it is. So like, I'm often thinking, well, how is that going to come back in from a business perspective?
Yeah. Are you gonna see the return on it? And it's so difficult to quantify. Even for the publicist, it's difficult to quantify. Yeah.
So I've thought about it a long time. Like, should you be putting money into like buying publicity? Because that's what the bigger artists are doing. Like the artists whose names you hear all the time. There's a reason why the news will have a story about AKA's new house on, I don't know, like Betty's Bay.
Yeah. It's not because it's newsworthy.
No, it's not. It was paid for, and we think as the public, we're like, oh my gosh, like, wow, that's so cool. No, dude, like his publicist board, they were thinking, okay, dude, what's happening in your life right now? Oh, you're in a feud with Casper Novis. Okay, cool. Let's publicize that.
We'll start a feud so we can publicize it.
Exactly.
Yeah, those things. When you outsource that kind of thing, you definitely need to have an idea. You need to have some expectation of how it's gonna come back. You can't just throw money into the water.
Exactly. And my assumption is that they probably have a separate legal entity, like these big artists, and their management teams have a separate legal entity that is paying for those things. So no one person is actually losing. No one individual is losing money. It's a entity that is there.
It's a circular economy. It's a value chain.
Exactly. So it's like, it's like when you get booked for corporate, like Sanlam books you for a show. It's like there's the person who's booking you, and they dig your sound, so they book you, and then they pay like huge money. So every artist is trying to play the corporate scene, because the money, it's almost like a nameless type of cash that you're getting, because it's a business. It's like a entity, you know. And
Yeah.
that's why they're able to afford things like that, because it makes as artists, we don't think that way. We often think like, oh my gosh, like I'm gonna take some of my salary and I'm going to put it in here, you know. That is
Sure. Yeah. That's such a great illustration because for me, when I started incurring by necessity recurring expenses, website hosting fees, hosting of this podcast, when I started incurring those fees, that was a motivator for me because all of a sudden the hustle is on. I can't afford to do nothing now this month because there's expenses here, and I, as you say, I don't want it to come out of the household budget. I don't want it to come from money that's got to pay for tires or food for the children. So it was a great motivator for me when that kind of infrastructure came on board. And as I say, it incurred these monthly expenses because now all of a sudden you've got to make sure that there's provision for it. That's really a great illustration, Josh. So we're talking now about how the world is changing. We're talking about how, as independent artists, we can't do the things that the major labels do because we are not major label artists. We are indie label artists. Like if you're an artist and you're paying for the production of your own music and marketing it, you're a label. My question is, what skills are required now? Because if the output is different, if the activities are different, I'm assuming that the skills that are required are different now for the aspiring indie artist who is looking, let's not say to make it, but rather to be sustainable in his career, to have his music career pay for itself. What skills do you think are needed there?
sure, man. It's basically everything other than what they teach you at music school. It's basically go get an MBA. No, I'm kidding. So it's definitely, I think the main skill is like, and this is the prerequisite for any kind of artist. It's got to be good, man. Like I think you've got to make sure the quality of your work is good at the basic level, and then everything that I've learned has been through keeping an open mind and thinking the way someone who is maybe not an artist thinks, you know. So which is why the manager is often like the artist manager is usually somebody who's not an artist themselves, but they're a savvy business person, you know. So definitely the business, I find that I spend a lot more time now. I try to keep a balance because I still want to create art, but I find myself a lot of time reading a lot of business resources, books. I'm trying to think how entrepreneurs in other fields think, because you actually have to become entrepreneurial in your thinking. You know, you need to be able to separate yourself from at least momentarily. You want to be able to separate yourself from the fact that you are just a creator. You know, you're creating art. You've got to become an entrepreneur. And then in terms of the other tools and things that you'll need, is basically, as an indie artist, at least, you've got to be able to do a lot of things that are required, like I said, from that other people would use in their normal day-to-day work. So for example, like being able to communicate effectively in a professional way, like not just in a sort of social media shorthand way, but like, you know, write emails. I get a lot of people commenting on like my email method, or, you know, and I'm not even advanced in emails. It's just like being able to tell a story, you know, through written text is a good thing. Being able to tell a story through video, you know, being able to pitch your idea. So with Patreon, is basically I wrote down my pitch, shot the video, got some B-roll from shows and stuff that we did, and edited it. I needed to know how to operate the editing suite, you know, a video editing suite. Sometimes you have to know how to design your own graphics, you know. My wife is a graphic designer, so I don't necessarily have to do that a lot anymore. But definitely before that, I think when I met you, Jerome, I was designing all the graphics for my band.
Yeah. And you were good at it. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I was doing like GIMP, like I still use GIMP if I need to quickly whip something together, which is the freeware version of Photoshop. Um, uh, s- I would think, yeah, good communication skills, video editing, graphics,
Mm.
these, yeah, it's a whole lot of stuff, man. It's almost like you don't have to be an expert at all of it, but you need to actually be able to do it on a basic level, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
from a business
graphic design.
perspective, yeah, from a business perspective, being able to keep your records, your business records in check in a kind of digital format. So being able to do a little bit of bookkeeping is good. So like with my accountant, for example, I don't let her do all of the bookkeeping. I do that myself. Like I sort of assign all the transactions accordingly, and then she basically just does the finalizing. Which is something I taught myself because there was a time where I couldn't afford to do it. Like I couldn't afford to hire an accountant, so I had to actually kind of figure out how it's done. So there's a lot of things that are boring, really boring, but you have to do. You have to
Yeah,
do them.
yeah.
you know like this, like a tax return, like it's not the thing I actually want to do, but you kind of have to do it. I've got a legal entity, which means there's certain things that I'm bound to keep the business open and operating, and so it was learning how to get all those protocols and things set up and keep it current. um yeah, did that answer the question?
Yes, that answered the question very well. I really appreciate that you mentioned those things. So yeah, it seems like as an indie artist, you really have to know all these different things and assume all these different roles. Something that sprang to mind when you were talking about the different elements, email correspondence and booking shows and all those kind of things. Something that sprang to mind for me is that when I am playing the role of artist manager, then I'm trying to take that seriously. I am the artist manager now. I'm not the artist who is doing some admin and doing the marketing role. I am the marketer. I am the brand ambassador. I am the A&R. And I find personally when I take those roles seriously in the moment, this is my job and this is what I'm doing. So I'm not Jerome Rex the musician now. I'm Jerome Rex the booking agent or the PR guy, and when you take it, that's the
You wear these
seriousness. Yes, you wear the hat. Yeah. So now you can't, as you say, use social media shorthand when you're communicating because that's not how a professional would do it. And that's really helped me make that transition when I'm doing those things. Yeah. Mm.
I mean, one thing that I had to learn was being able to um, it's a hard thing for other people to learn as well, is basically if you are wearing the manager hat now, for them to kind of respect that, in the sense of if they, I don't know, I suppose people are very sort of you know kind of one or the other in their thinking about it. So if they see you as the artist, that the assumptions of what the artist is can sometimes be a block to the workings of the effective operation. So it's like if they see you as an artist, then by default they assume you can't speak business.
You're the stereotypical artist. Yeah. You're just, you're the
Yeah, you
talent.
can't reply to an you can't reply to an email. We've got to go over your head, which can be painful at times. And I'm sure you've encountered that before, Jerome, where you are the artist manager and you're the artist. So now there's this, like, people are like confused, like, wait, hold on, like, who are you really?
Yeah. 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 No, that does become a challenge. That does become a challenge. People struggle to make that connection. And I find personally, it becomes difficult to negotiate because you're negotiating kind of from a place of, I'm the artist, this is what I want, where a manager would, I suppose, have the leeway. They can be the bad guy, you're the artist, you can't be the bad guy here.
And that's something that I've had a few managers in my career. My career is not big enough for me to warrant employing someone as my manager, because my best manager was a guy who was really good at it, but they couldn't really afford to retain him. You see, the thing is, they work on commission. So it's like if he's doing such a good job, he should be getting at least 20% of the earnings from whatever activity it is. But if you're not earning big money, then there's no reason for them to stick around. So then I basically had to learn how to do it myself. But it does make negotiating a little bit harder, um, because now you've got to. I basically have put up a professional front between myself and anyone who wants to work with me. So there is a level of professionalism that you get when you look at the branding or whatever. Okay, cool, this is legit. It's not just it's not a Gmail email address. It's the fruitvendor.com.
Fruitvendor.com. Yeah.
So I've tried to separate it to a degree, just to make those things a little bit easier. But it does come with a lot of challenges, and there are times where you can't. Where in order to preserve like a relationship with a promoter or something, you can't go in there like a typical manager would. Hey man, where's our money?
Yeah. No, you don't get to do that.
A manager can do that, whereas if you're the artist and the manager, it's a little bit like yeah.
Well, I find, now that you've mentioned that, I find that email is really a nice separator, because now you're corresponding with a bookings at email address or an info at email address, and it just gives you that little bit of space where the person who is corresponding, they in their mind are now dealing with a manager type, because my email is not going to Jerome personally, it's going to bookings at Jerome Rex or info at Jerome Rex, and then it becomes a bit of a different conversation, and that does
help, and often they will assume that other person who's replying, depending,
is someone else.
Yeah, they'll think it's like your PA or whatever,
Yeah, and I let them think that. Okay, Josh, thank you so much for your time. We've been at it for quite a while now, so I'm going to let you get back to your wife and your baby to be. But before we go, here's an opportunity for you to plug a little bit. What are you busy with? Of course, people must go and find patreon.com/fruitvendor and go see what's happening there. What else are you busy with? What can we look forward to? How can people get in touch?
At the moment, what we're doing is we are releasing new tracks quite regularly on the streaming site. So the album, The Seedling, which is my first full-length album, is up on all the streaming sites. So you can go and stream and listen to it. It's also up on Bandcamp if you prefer to pay. And then I do have some physical CDs. If anybody's keen to sort of get something physical, we can connect, and they can just email me. You can just email me on my website. The website is www.thefruitvendor.com. Yeah, that's pretty much it. On Patreon, that's actually where I'm focusing most of the live activities. I do a thing on there called the Fruit Jam, which is like a live performance that I do for patrons only, ever so often. And on Patreon, they actually get to see the behind the scenes. It's basically like a online video diary. Because for a long time, you thought that, seeing the artists at work was, and their thought process was just something that you wouldn't actually tell people about. But it turns out that people love the behind the scenes.
They want the process.
Yeah, they want to see how this whole thing came together and what was the story all about and what inspired you. So that's where Patreon comes in, but it also helps. It helps us to keep going, and I think all too often, especially in Cape Town, there's some great bands, but they kind of like fizzle away, if they don't stick it out, they kind of like, everybody gets older and then it kind of like fizzles away. So Patreon has kind of been a great place for us to constantly be doing something, while not necessarily doing all the big major things that artists are typically expected to do, but it is pretty major. So
because you can survive in the same way that someone who's gigging every weekend is surviving, and your earnings are comparable and your following is comparable.
Exactly. And it allows me to plan, it allows me to think, okay, what are we going to do next month? What can we do in 6 months from now? And it's tiered specific. So it's basically the more you put in, the more you get out. People on the higher tiers, for example, get a consultation / a music lesson with me once a month. And it could be about whatever, it could just be a conversation, about like a conversation that we're having now. Um, and then there's a whole bunch of, I'm not going to go into great detail about all the different benefits and whatever, but there's some nice sweet benefits. But if you come in on the lowest tier, you basically get all our music for free. And you get access to the live stream, and there's like discounts on like shows and merch and all of those things as well. So yeah, I encourage you to check it out.
Yeah, go and check it out. I command you. Go to check out thefruitvendor.com. Check out Fruit Vendor on Patreon. Go and see what he's busy with. It's that delicious funk sound that you cannot quite define or put your finger on, but it's super enjoyable and it's a whole lot of fun. Josh, thanks for being here. It was super dope having you on the show, and it was really, really entertaining seeing you here, man. Thanks for taking the time out.
Cool, Mr. Rex. Cheers, man.
Peace.